here with a client doing a 1031 exchange, and I have learned a lot about the process. I've worked alongside this process before as a listing agent, but this is my first time being on the buyer side of the transaction, so I just wanted to share with you what I've been learning as I've been a part of this process on a deeper level. Before diving in, I want to quickly remind you to subscribe, and if you like the videos that you see on my channel, I am putting out new videos every Thursday about life and real estate here in Southwest Washington. Feel free to reach out to me with any questions or comments, and I love seeing those likes. Okay, back to business. You are an investor and you are wanting to sell your investment property and purchase a new one for whatever reason. Maybe you want to consolidate assets into an apartment building or switch from an unmanaged investment property to a managed one. Maybe you have held on to your property for a long time and you've depreciated it and maximized those tax benefits, and you're ready to offload the asset and get a new one. If any of those scenarios are speaking to you, then you might want to consider doing a 1031 exchange so that you can cash out and move on to the next investment property with limited taxes. The definition of a 1031 exchange is that it is a swap of one investment property for another that allows for capital gains to be tax deferred. The term gets its name from IRS Code Section 1031. An exchange can only be made with like-kind properties, and IRS rules limit use with vacation properties. If used correctly, there is no limit on how many times or how frequently you can do a 1031 exchange. You can exchange an apartment building for raw land or a ranch for a strip mall. The rules are pretty liberal. Let's cover a few definitions that come up a lot during 1031 exchanges. Number one, QI. This stands for Qualified Intermediary, or the entity that acts on behalf of the taxpayer. This person has no economic interest except for an exchange fee for facilitating the exchange. The QI is also known as the accommodator, facilitator, or intermediary. Number two, exchanger. That is you, the investor. Number three, relinquished property. That is the property you are selling. Number four, replacement property. This is the new property you are acquiring to replace the replacement property as your investment property. There are two key timing rules you have to observe in order to do the exchange successfully. First, the identification period. This is the time period during which the exchanger must identify potential replacement properties in their tax-deferred like-kind exchange. The period is 45 calendar days from the date the deed is recorded on the sale of the relinquished property. By that 45-day mark, the exchanger has to turn in an identification form that the 1031 agency will send to you. There is normally a 3-property rule, so you have to identify up to 3 potential replacement properties. The exchange period. This is the period of time during which the exchanger must complete the acquisition of the replacement property. This period is 180 days from the transfer of the deed of trust of the relinquished property. So from the date the deed is recorded in the new owner's name for the property you are selling, you have 180 calendar days to close on the replacement property. One question that came up for my client is how to avoid doing a reverse 1031 exchange. He had heard rumors of them being more expensive and wanted to make sure he didn't accidentally incur one. It's hard to do on accident. A reverse 1031 exchange occurs when you complete the purchase on the replacement property prior to closing on the relinquished property. A reverse 1031 exchange is actually set up as an LLC. It's a lot more complex and expensive, but it is not as expensive as failing the 1031 exchange timelines and having to pay capital gains. The more simple way to do it is to stick to the proper order of events. Sell your relinquished property, the funds are held in the exchange, and then you close on the new property with 180 days from the date the deed records of your relinquished property. Another important consideration is that your replacement property needs to cost as much or more than the relinquished property, or else it becomes a partial exchange. A partial exchange entails receiving cash, excluded property, or non-like-kind property on the replacement property, as well as an exchange of qualified like-kind property. In the case of a partial exchange, tax liability would be incurred on the non-qualifying portion, and capital gain would be deferred on the qualifying portion of the exchange. When you're writing offers, we will need to use an evidence of funds addendum to disclose that the funds to close are contingent upon the sale of your relinquished property. I will need the address of that property and also the contact information for the listing agent selling that property, if it's not me, so we can coordinate the closing with care. Being a 1031 exchange buyer is very similar to being a cash buyer. Sellers love it as long as their listing agents are educating them about the process and they know what they're getting into. You can typically close sooner than buyers using financing, and sellers appreciate that there are less hoops to jump through in the transaction. All right, there's your little introduction to 1031 exchanges. As I said before, throw me a like, leave me a comment, subscribe to my channel, and I hope to hear from you soon.